Okay, and we're live for XYZ number 15. I'm here with the usual anchor, my co-host David Hiscox, the editor-in-chief and head honcho of XYZ newspaper, as well as Chris James from the Breakup YouTube channel, which is on YouTube. I haven't actually linked it in the description just yet. I'll do that shortly. But yeah, Chris, welcome to our weekly live stream. This is your first time as a guest, so thank you for joining us.
Thanks for having me on. I really appreciate it.
No worries. I won't thank Dave for joining us because he's a dirty Melbourne supporter.
It's always good to be here, Matthew.
Yes, I know. You're basking in some wonderful company. Unfortunately, you're a Melbourne supporter.
I just love being invited onto this sincerity overload. I really appreciate it.
The sincerity. Yes. How did Melbourne won on the weekend, didn't you? Who'd you beat?
Melbourne are 4-3. We beat St Kilda.
Oh wow, well done.
We're the 10th best team in the competition.
10th best.
Yeah, it's around about where we've been for the last 3 years. So
yeah,
just like Kanye, we need to break out of our mental prison and find a way to just surge upwards.
Do you know what the difference between Melbourne and Kanye is?
Melbourne are really, really awesome, and Kanye is like around about average. Yeah.
No, I was going to say at least Kanye's got talent. But
them's fighting words, Matty. I think like you just got over Essendon after a bit of a struggle, just like Melbourne did. So like it's good to see Melbourne and Hawthorn around about the same level.
Yeah, except that we beat you by 75 points. So I mean, there's that.
Yeah, although it's just a one-off. You know, that's a sample of one. You're talking about them, Matty.
I would say it's the last example in a sample of 10 years, but you know, you can be optimistic if you like.
I go back a little further actually to 1963. But,
Oh yeah, you keep talking about this fable was a preliminary final or grand final where we beat you.
Oh, 1988, yeah, you beat us by 96 points. Yeah.
Yeah. I was alive then, but I was too young to understand footy, so I think I moved to Hong Kong by then as well. 1988 might have been the year. That was probably the last year that I was in Melbourne before moving away. Yeah. I mean, Hawthorn won on the weekend. We ended up winning pretty comfortably, but we played terribly in the first half, like we did against every other team. Like we played terribly against Melbourne in the first quarter, played terribly against St Kilda in the first quarter, and we played terribly against North Melbourne in the first half. So it seems like Hawthorn just start badly and then played well in the end. So be careful. Watch out for the Hawks if we can actually manage to string 4 quarters together.
Being sincere here, like you do only have to play one good quarter of football and you win. It's a little bit scary. It's really an interesting year.
Yeah. And Box Hill Hawks are on top quite comfortably as well. So that's usually a sign. That's usually a sign of contendership. I don't rate Hawthorn that highly. I still think we're 5th to 8th, most likely 5th or 6th, I think. But you know, if Box Hill are flag favourites in the VFL, then other clubs should be watching out. Look out for the mighty, fighting, happy team at Hawthorn, led by the greatest coach in history.
Yeah, no comment.
I'll take that as a concession of defeat. All right, so let's get to the topics of the day. We've skipped our usual footy banter, which is basically just Melbourne suck and Hawthorn are amazing, even when Hawthorn lose and Melbourne win.
What do you mean you missed the usual football banter? I mean, I felt like
usually it goes on for about half an hour.
Yeah,
I felt like I was obsolete there for a considerable period of time. I've got no idea what you guys are talking about.
Oh, that's right. You're in Adelaide, aren't you? You've only got Port Adelaide and Adelaide to support. What a choice. That's like choosing between the Democrats and the Greens.
He's laughing because it's true.
It is.
I'm just like...
He doesn't know what we're talking about. He probably doesn't follow the footy.
I'm just like, thanks for having me on. I'm really stoked. Thank you.
All right.
This is great.
So, topic of the day, first cab off the rank, is the wonderful march through the media of Kanye West. I say march because he's been in the media for a number of years now, but he's finally come out and started saying things that the media don't like at all. He's gone off the reservation, so to speak. I've been following it quite intently, and I mean, the media reaction to this has been look, I've tried to find the right word for it, but disgusting, horrendous, ridiculous, clown-like.
Predictable.
Very predictable as well. That's a very good point. It is extremely predictable. I'm going to bring up a very simple example. Another example from the Triple M. Now, as the regular listeners and viewers of this show will know, I listen to Triple M regularly because I think they can do the rock music and the sport. I mean, they claim to be rock, sport, and comedy. They claim to be rock, sport, and comedy. Fighters. Yeah, pretty much. They claim to be rock, sport, and comedy, and I say 2 out of 3 ain't bad. The problem is they suck so much at comedy, and they seem to think that being comedians means you get to be political commentators, even though you have no idea what you're talking about. Now, they've done the same thing that they did the same thing that every other media company's done. So he come out and said, you know, had the comments, 400 years of slavery, that sounds like a choice. And they've gone, oh, how could they say slavery is a choice? And it's like, if you listen to what he's saying and you listen to the way he explains himself, yeah, look, he wasn't very articulate with this position, but he's quite clearly saying that it's the last 150 years that is the choice, because slavery ended 150 years ago and slavery started 400 years ago. So 400 years, that sounds like a choice to me. So it's quite obvious what he's trying to say. And the media have just jumped on this and just, you know, taken his words out of context and smeared him, attacked him. And I actually think it's a really bad look, because people can go online and see exactly what he was talking about, and there's plenty of commentary around it. But listening to Mick Malloy talk about this and go, oh, it's so bad, how can he say this? It's like, I don't listen to Mick Malloy for his political commentary. In fact, I only listen to Mick Malloy because he's on Triple M. So I don't appreciate having his views shoved down my throat, especially when they're as blatantly ignorant as they are in that regards. But I'm sure you guys have got a similar take, or it'd be interesting to see how you've seen the Kanye woke event.
Are we handing it off to anyone in particular?
You can go. You go, Chris. No, you go, Chris. Dave can just sit there and wallow in defeat of the Melbourne supporter.
Look, my take on Kanye is, and I think I've vocalized or at least sort of suggested this to you, Matt, is that, I mean, I could give a fuck less if he's doing it for album sales, give a fuck less if he's being genuine or not. It doesn't really matter. I mean, you know, if he's promoting his album, that's as good as him promoting this point of view. You know what I'm saying? Like, so I think, like, I'm happy with what he's doing. I'm really, really happy with what he's doing. Just someone else butt in. Someone else give me something to talk. Let me flow off someone else.
Yeah. It's interesting because a lot of conservatives are sort of saying, yeah, maybe Kanye is the guy. Kanye is becoming a bit of an alt-right meme. He's the base black man in a MAGA hat. I think that he's genuine about what he's saying, because we've been seeing this sort of thing for a little while. Like, you see some of the songs that he's been talking about. He did that speech last year at one of his concerts where he said, "We'll make America great again," and everybody booed. So I think he's genuine in the direction that he's going. I don't think he's one of those people. He's not either left or right. He's quite literally a free thinker, and he likes the way that Donald Trump thinks, and he is prepared to think outside the box. In terms of the argument that he's making, it's a pretty standard argument which a lot of people, a lot of conservatives in America have been making for a while. Basically, the argument that the Democrats are keeping black people in the metaphorical plantation by selling them this grievance and just telling them all the time that they're still oppressed, it keeps them in a mindset which stops them from taking responsibility for their own lives and being able to actually get themselves out of bad situations. Instead, they look at their own lives and they always blame white people. And so that keeps them sort of in the lower classes. It keeps them dependent on welfare. And that in turn, increases the power of the Democrat Party, because they can basically bribe black people with votes. And so that's what conservatives have been arguing for quite some time, is what the Democrats do. They use the expression, the Democrats are the real racists, because of that. I have problems with that. I don't believe in the word racism, but that's a whole other point. So a lot of black conservatives have been arguing this for quite some time as well. It's just that Kanye is the guy with the biggest profile who's come out and said this. And Kanye said it in the way that Kanye always speaks. Like the guy speaks in parables anyway. And so when he said it, like I knew exactly what he meant, but it was just a perfect opportunity for people to take him out of context, and then they've just gone from there.
Yeah, I tend to agree. All right, now you go, Chris.
I don't think Kanye's going to become political, particularly political. I think he's always been a cultural figure, and he has been a cultural warrior for a long time. Even if those of us on the right, or quote unquote right, tend not to agree with a lot of his particular political or cultural stances. Katrina would be one of them. He's not going to become political. He's ironclastic. If he's conservative, he is most certainly lowercase c conservative. If he is liberal, he's lowercase l liberal. I think he's a culture warrior, and I think, like, he has addressed certain cultural issues in the past and attacked them. He's attacking this now because I don't know what he feels, but I'm doing really good at fucking sentences tonight.
No, you're okay, mate. Don't worry about it. Just with Kanye, it's interesting the way that he is coming out like this, and I watched a video and someone sort of explained it. I think it was a Sargon video where he sort of made the point that the only reason the left are so angry at Kanye, because there's been other stars, like other movie stars and stuff, that have sort of come out and had expressed these views. And yeah, look, they've been disowned, but there hasn't been this kind of meltdown. The biggest reason there has been this kind of meltdown is because he's black. And it's, as you said, David, he's telling black people to get it. Like, the Democrats and the left have them in this plantation. They're basically being used as vote cattle, where they take taxpayer money, they give them welfare, and say, come and vote for us. And Kanye is saying, well, look, it hasn't worked, has it? Like, you're still, you're playing the victim conflict. You're playing the victim. Stop being a victim. And if you stop being a victim, then you might actually be more successful. And he's come out with this message of individuality and free thought, and what you could describe as a classically Christian message. Even though I don't know if he's been saying, I don't know how much of a Christian he is. I believe he's a little bit religious. I'm not a huge Kanye fan. Like, I never listened to his stuff. I just love the fact that he's come out and the left have started attacking him so fervently. I think it's amazing, because what it's telling to people, it's showing to people that if you come out and you have a free thought, then you are going to get attacked. It doesn't matter who you are or what you've done or what you've achieved. If you go off the left-wing plantation, then you are going to be attacked. This is why
Nothing will save you.
And that's the thing, exactly. Nothing will save you. And they've attacked him and attacked him and attacked him, and he's refused to apologize, and he's doubled down, and they have nowhere to go. Like, all they can do is escalate the attacks, and they haven't worked. They haven't worked at all. I would imagine his album's probably going to do really, really well, even if it sucks. And
you know what the great thing about Kanye is he is very similar to Donald Trump. He does double down. He does double down. He does double down. He will not apologize, even if he is wrong. Like, he's a very, very strong personality. He's a leader. And I think that's maybe why a lot of us on this side of politics have maybe overlooked a lot of the previous stuff he's said or he's done, because we can just go, just like Donald Trump, well, Donald Trump came from the left. Donald Trump came from the Democrat side of politics. And then all of a sudden, Donald Trump was just talking our language and shutting the game down. And, maybe that's exactly what Kanye's doing right now. Kanye has come from a different side of politics. He's ironclastic as well, and he's just shutting the game down. He's, as I said, he's not, a capital C conservative, but, he's certainly preaching to a conservative base with what he's talking about right now.
It's important to not underestimate the fact that he hasn't apologized. And it's a really good point to highlight because it's such. I've, I've been making this point for a while now. Always double down, never apologize. And the reason you don't apologize for this situation is because he's not lying. He's not doing anything immoral. He's not doing anything wrong. He's just expressing his thought. And they just want him to apologize because he's not sharing their views. They don't want him to apologize because he's done anything illegal. He hasn't done anything universally immoral. He hasn't hurt anyone. He hasn't even defamed anyone. All he's done is say, I want to think the way I want, and there's nothing you can do about it. And they just get upset. They get angry, and all they do is they're basically just kids throwing their toys out of the car going, this guy was supposed to be on our side and now he's not. And the best thing about it as well is Trump's support amongst black males has doubled. It's gone from 10% to 20%, just pretty much overnight. It's amazing how quickly it's turned around. And as we've always said, and as the great famous, was it Andrew Breitbart said, politics is downstream from culture. And in this case, politics is most definitely downstream from culture, because Kanye, I could imagine, is really, for want of a better word, red pilling a lot of black people and showing them exactly how you can be an independent, free-thinking individual and set a better life for yourself as your goal, and just not have to worry about playing the victim anymore. Because it's the difference between an external locus of control and an internal locus of control. So what the Democrats have tried to do is give the black people in America an external locus of control. The left try and do it with people in Australia, especially Aboriginals, and other sort of minority oppressed groups. They try to give them an external locus of control. That means all of the things that happen in their life are because of external forces. But what free thinking does, and what individuality does, and what Kanye is sort of talking about, is having an internal locus of control, having self-power, having self-responsibility, personal responsibility, and taking charge of your own life and setting your own goals and making your own life better without anybody else's help. And this is, well, I mean, not without anybody else's help. What I mean is without getting handouts. So without taking charity, without getting handouts, by working hard and actually making a better life for yourself. That's an internal locus of control. That's a position of power. That's a position of strength. This is where dominant cultures come from. And you said he's a leader. I mean, I don't like using the term alpha male because I don't really think it quite fits all that well for human beings. I mean, we do have alpha males, but it's a little bit different to what it is in the animal kingdom, where it's a little bit more, there's the one apex male and then everyone else. But in human cultures, it's more about prestige and all that kind of thing. So it's not quite the same. But leadership male, the leader male, the charismatic man, the successful male, that's probably a better descriptor, even though it's more broad. But an alpha male does cover that. So if you want to use that, you could say, yes, he is that alpha male and he's embodying those traits. And that is, strength, leadership, not doubling down, or not apologizing even if he's wrong, because there's nothing wrong with being wrong. You don't apologize for being wrong. You apologize for doing the wrong thing, and for committing immorality and committing crimes and all that kind of thing. That's what you apologize for. You never apologize for just being yourself. Like, that's ridiculous. And he's embodying that leadership quality, even if he's wrong about certain issues. But it's still great to actually see a big pop figure coming out and really leading the way for a lot of people to follow. There's
another way.
Yeah, well, I don't.
Sorry, Dave, you go, and then we'll get you.
Yeah, sure. There's another way in which Kanye is really triggering the left, and it's to do with that, talking about how politics is downstream from culture. When we think of the Kardashians, he's married to Kim Kardashian. They're pretty much the most high-profile family in the world, like celebrity family, and the dad has become Caitlyn Jenner. And so that's a great example of pushing he chose to do it, but you've got a great example there of progressive politics being pushed through the culture. Kanye's come along and he's hijacked all of that. He's just completely changed the conversation. No longer is it about like just transgender activism, like with Bob Jenner, and just whatever else they like to talk about. It's all about Kanye, and he's just completely altered. Like it's been talked about on the internet as well. He's completely altered reality, and he's completely cut that thing off at the knees. Like now, Caitlyn Jenner is always going to be associated with Kanye West. The whole family is always going to be associated with Kanye West. That whole family, that whole empire, and that whole cultural and political vehicle is always going to be associated with the guy who just switched things around and turned things towards Donald Trump. He's just changed everything for them.
But you know what's really cool is that Kim Kardashian, she came out and she ran defense for her husband on Twitter.
That is great. When
Kanye West relaunched his Twitter account and all this stuff started pouring out over the past couple of weeks, Kim Kardashian came out and she defended her husband, and she said, my husband's not crazy. He's a strong thinker. He, he believes what he believes. And I'm paraphrasing, but she was basically saying, well, it's unfair for the media to criticize him in the way that they are criticizing him. And, I think that's really, really good. Do you know
there's a word for this, Christopher? It's called dick conversion.
Dick conversion.
Yeah,
that's actually probably a phrase or a term, but can you please explain that to me?
Well, basically, like Kanye West is a strong male. You can use the word alpha male, and
I don't think he's eaten any soy in his life. I can tell you that.
No,
much.
Yeah, I don't think so either. And women are attracted to those types of men. And one of the things that women tend to do is they, like, especially if he's a really strong kind of male, they tend to parrot what the men say. They parrot their views, or at the very least, like, they're going to support them. And so, like, he's basically come on in and basically just turned her whole viewpoint around. Maybe not completely internally, but at least publicly, she's out there going, he's a good man. He's not crazy.
No, look, I wouldn't actually say that. I would say that they probably respect each other one-to-one, because her and him were both like Kanye and Kim that I'm talking about were both in photographs with Hillary leading up or during the presidential run on Instagram and stuff. So I think it's just a husband and wife partnership, and they support each other. And it's nice to see that it is not just a fake celebrity relationship, and that she will go to bat for him and vice versa. And I think that's really good, and that sort of solidifies everything that Kanye's talking about and his viewpoints. It makes it legitimizes everything he's talking about when his wife goes into bat for him. And
it also will be pissing off a lot of feminists, I would imagine, because he's come out and he's played this role of the alpha male and the strong masculine man, and she's supporting him and essentially following him. And I mean, David, you're right. When women will naturally follow the man that they're in a relationship with, if that man is strong enough for them to follow. This is just the way that humans are. This is the way that we're biologically bred. Women will naturally follow a strong male leader. And he's come out and he's saying this. And you're right, even if she doesn't believe him, even if she doesn't agree with him, she will still support him because he is putting out such a strong persona. And I believe it. I think it's genuine. I don't believe it's just a marketing ploy. From what I've seen of Kanye, it seems congruent to his style. Like I said, I'm not a huge Kanye fan.
Can I just interject there, Maddie? I know I brought that up, and all I was saying in terms of that was, even if it is a marketing ploy, I don't care, because he's certainly doing a lot of work that needs to be done right now. So it's really not going to hurt if it's just a marketing ploy.
Well, what I think is actually a little bit more likely is if it is some sort of marketing ploy, which I don't actually believe that it is. I think he's just probably thought, I'm just going to start mashing shit up on Twitter, because he has been in contact with Donald Trump before. I think that's the most likely explanation. It might not be. I could be wrong. I'm not in the inner circle, obviously. But he might have seen other people like Joy Villa come out and wear the Make America Great dress again, and then she goes to the very top of the charts. And you'd have to be blind not to notice that. So if he's even got these thoughts in him, and maybe he's a little bit conflicted, like, do I say it? Do I not say it? Do I come out and say what I'm thinking? If he sees that and he's like, if he sees that and he sees Joy Villa going straight to the top of the charts just by being true to what she believes, then he would be crazy not to see that and think, well, you know what? If I just say what I believe, then maybe it'll do really well for me. And he's come out and just started, mashing up on Twitter, saying whatever he wants to say. Yeah, and a lot of the things he says are fairly down the line, classically liberal thought, individual liberty, everyone should have their own, everyone should have their own meaning, and blah, 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 all that kind of thing. It sounds a lot of very, very Jordan Peterson. I know we've had the XYZ debate on Jordan Peterson that we're not going to get into today, but it does sound very, very similar to what Jordan Peterson talks about when it comes to individual improvement and finding meaning in your life and growing a better life for yourself. Because a lot of it
I think you need to really calm down right now, Matty, because everything Kanye said, according to the mainstream media that I've read, he's far right. That's not mainstream liberal. He's a far right fucking neo-Nazi.
Yeah,
and do you know what? I'm not gonna lie. The reason that I delayed getting onto this fucking podcast with you guys was because I was listening to 808s and Heartbreak about 45 minutes ago and committing hate crimes on ethnic minorities, mainly ripping hijabs off.
That's an interesting thing to say on the live stream.
Apparently,
have you never seen my channel?
No. No, I actually haven't seen your channel.
Apparently, Kanye's next album is going to be called 1488. Yeah.
1488.
I can't wait for the video clip where the video clip is going to be like a very Kanye artistic representation or emulation of the opening scene from Romper Stomper. It's going to be beautiful. Like, the Asian kid who gets beaten up, he's going to be wearing some Kanye, like, Adidas sneakers, while he's riding his skateboard. Like,
I'm looking forward to seeing Kanye West at Footscray Station.
I don't think that underpass is around anymore, but Kanye can get it recreated. We have faith.
Yeah, he's got the money to build it.
On that note, it's probably a good idea to move on to the next topic. Got a little bit hijacked there by some crazy talk. I have no idea what you guys are on about. Anyway, it does lead into our next topic, which again is one of my favorite topics: freedom of speech. More specifically, Tommy Robinson's Day for Freedom, and how Tommy Robinson has basically had a very, very successful rally. I don't know if you two saw the speeches and that kind of thing. I saw his speech and a couple of other people speaking, and it was actually quite moving watching it, because, Tommy Robinson's a man who's spent the last better part of a decade being slandered and attacked, and he's had threats to his life. He's had threats to his family's life. And you could see him come out there on the stage and seeing this crowd, which apparently when you're on the stage, you couldn't even see the back of it. So there was a lot of people out there and they were chanting Tommy Robinson, like they were chanting his name and everything. So you can see from his point of view that he spent the better part of a decade being abused, and now he's come out to this and all this support, all this grassroots support for him. So you could see that it was a very moving moment for him as a man. And what he spoke well. I don't particularly think Tommy Robinson is an amazing public speaker, but in these days, you don't need to be an amazing public speaker. A lot of the time, all you need to do is tell the truth, because so many people are just unwilling to do that. In fact, there aren't many people at all who are willing to stand up in front of a crowd and just tell the uncensored truth. So he's gained that respect over the last 10 years, and people respect him for that and respect him for what he's gone through. Now, I don't want to turn this into a religious sermon, but again, this is exactly the message of Christianity, in that you go out, you have your principles, you set the principles, and you tell the truth. And, you know, people will slander you, people will attack you, and people will come at you and they'll try to destroy you. But if you just keep telling the truth and you keep going forward, then God finds a way of, you know, God will bring you a better life, or he'll make a martyr out of you, which is what happened with Jesus. So it was really good to see it. I was really, really proud of him. The Day for Freedom was a raging success as far as I can tell. One of the articles about it, The Guardian said that there was only 2,000 to 3,000 people there, but you could see from the cameras that there was significantly more. I would have thought between maybe 10 and 20,000 at least. But yeah, no, it was really, really good. It's great to see that the United Kingdom are actually, at least some people are willing to stand up for their nation and stand up for their culture. It's actually great, and they're willing to tell the truth about the religion that shall not be named. And I think we're going to find a lot more people who are willing to actually stand up and start telling the truth about it, because one of the things that he said was that people have been bullied into submission, essentially, and that they've been told that if you say anything about Islam, then you are a racist, you're a bigot, or you're preaching hate, or you know, all this kind of absolute rubbish, all this slander. And he basically said in his speech, just say what you want to say. Do not worry about what they have to say about you. And he can say that because he's the example. He's showing that example of what happens. All you need to do is just tell the truth, say what you want to say, and let the chips fall where they may. If you're telling the truth, you're still being moral, and you still have the high moral ground. And if everyone starts telling the truth, then there's absolutely nothing that the elite can do about it, because people will just say whatever the hell they want anyway.
So, Matty, in the speech that Tommy Robinson gave, yep, did he actually talk about the things that are wrong with Islam? And did he mention, like, did he make a point of saying that the British people are being replaced, or did he focus mostly on free speech?
No, he didn't mention that. He didn't do the replaced thing. I mean, he did that with Martin Sellen's speech, but he did. Yes. He did call out Islam very, very directly. In fact, he spoke about a 14-year-old kid who, I think it was a 14-year-old kid who went to Speaker's Corner and started saying Islam is a violent religion. Islam incites violence. And this kid had the counter-terrorism unit come around to his house, and his mother was in tears and all this kind of thing. And this is what they do. They intimidate people into silence. So you say these things, and then they come and they would you ever kill for your ideology? And they ask him all these questions. And this is the bullying, and this is the totalitarianism of the elite right now, where they will suppress anyone who dares to speak out. And he's just come out and just said, yes, Islam does incite violence. It's a violent ideology. It's a violent political ideology. He just said it right there. And that's the thing. What are the police or what are the establishment going to do about it? Because they can't put him in prison for it. He hasn't done anything wrong. I mean, they might be able to try and charge him with a hate crime, because we know that it's all down to interpretation of the judge. The judge can just say whatever they want. But again, it's like I said before, all they do is make a martyr out of him. He had 10,000, 20,000 people there. If they put him in prison, he'd have 100,000 or 200,000 people, or maybe 1 million people there. So he's really done very, very well. I think if he just keeps on the path that he's going, he could end up being a very significant historical figure, potentially.
Yeah, what is really important, what seems to be unifying people in Britain is the topic of free speech. What's really important is that this develops into a movement, into a nationalist movement, because the British people are being replaced, and most likely Britain will become Islamified. So what we're talking about here isn't just free speech. Free speech is a really, really important tool to achieve a goal, and that goal is survival of the British people. So what they need to do from this is to just keep getting those signals out, getting that message out. The fact that if they don't speak up now, this is why free speech is important. If they don't speak up now, we'll see the Islamification of Britain. We will see basically the demographic replacement of Indigenous Britons. And it's a thing where it doesn't matter if the people who come in adopt British values, whether they do or they don't. To replace one population with another group of people is completely immoral. And the people of Britain have the human right to survive in and of themselves. And this seems like a really, really good way of starting a movement, and sort of red pilling people on their identity and realizing, hey, we are actually allowed to identify as who we are, and then launch a political movement starting from there.
And one thing I will add to that is that in this rally, there were a lot of British flags, and they did make a point of saying this is our flag. So it's most definitely a nationalist movement in that regards.
It will need to move from flag, pardon me, to country and identity.
They might move in that direction if they want to. I think a lot of them, I mean, nation is extremely important, and yeah, country is extremely important. And I mean, I know you're big on that sort of aspect of it. I don't want to get into a ethno-nationalist versus civic nationalist debate. I mean,
it's where we always end
up there somehow. See, I always argue that if you enforce the values of a nation and you say, these are our values, you must adhere to these values, and if you don't adhere to these values, the door's over there and you can either leave or we'll kick you out. If you tell people that, then it will filter out most people anyway. It'll filter out the people that you don't want, and it'll bring it down to a trickle in terms of permanent immigration because so much of culture is actually genetic. See, I'm less of I don't think it's all down to race. I think it's more to do with your genetic inclination as an individual. And it is true that British people, like especially white men, are a lot more likely, as far as I can tell, to support individualist, true liberal values like, you know, freedom of speech, free markets, and all that kind of thing. So I think there's definitely a genetic component to it. So that what I'm trying to say is if you enforce those values very, very strongly, then the country and all that other, you know, the identity stuff sort of takes care of itself. And because then you've got the people that do come in, you're not excluding people based on arbitrary reasons, but the people who do come in are going to be pretty much the same anyway. And I mean, biologically, it's good to get genetic diversity because it means your children are healthier and all that kind of thing, as long as it's not overwhelming in terms of, like you said, just sweeping away at people, which I obviously vehemently oppose. This is why I oppose mass immigration, because it makes that integration very, very it makes it almost impossible, actually. It makes what I was saying actually impossible.
The model I would go for is have like it's a British nation, and Indigenous Britons are Britons, and people who come in to Britain are guests, but it's understood that they are citizens of another country, because like you can insist all you want that people who are coming into your country follow your values, but then if you become a minority in your country, that argument loses a lot of weight, because then all those other cultures start to like just by weight of numbers and facts on the ground.
Here's the thing:
push their own agenda as well.
Sorry, I don't want to interrupt you, but yeah, if there wouldn't be any other cultures, I'm completely against multiculturalism. There would be no other cultures. I'm completely opposed to ethnic enclaves. I don't think they're a good look. I think if you're going to live in an ethnic enclave, you should forfeit the right to citizenship in a nation. It's funny because you know, you've got your stance and I've got mine, but I think my stance in terms of immigration is actually a lot more hardline than yours. See, I would extend no citizenship to anyone who's not born here. And I would say if you're not born here, you cannot become a citizen of Australia. And the only way that your children will ever become citizens is if one of their parents is an Australian citizen. That's the only way I'll do it. And maybe I extend the opportunity for people who put in military. If you're from another nation, then if you want to put in frontline military service, so no officers, you must be a grunt. If you want to do a full term of frontline service, then you can become citizens after that. But for me, I think
you're more hardline than me. I'm tending more towards the only British.
Yeah, that's all right. I mean, that's your position. I suppose that's where we differ. Chris, what do you want to weigh in on this this issue, because it is a very important issue, and the one that the media don't really want to talk about at all.
I'm literally less hardline than both of you.
Well, that's not surprising, seeing as we're both fairly anti-immigration.
No, look, I mean, you know, like, I'm cool with immigration as long as it's controlled by the numbers, and as long as you know, the people we're importing into, you know, any given country that we may live in is or those people are those who are going to assimilate. And you know, Western Europe's fucked at this point. You know, Western Europe is fucked. You've basically got entire enclaves of Islamic communities where Islam is not just a religion, but it's also a culture. And you know, the rest of Western Europe can't break into that. And I just don't want to see that happen to, you know, Australia, Canada, or the United States. I think that's pretty straightforward, common sense kind of thing. I don't mind having Muslims immigrate, and I don't mind having Muslims in my community. I just don't want to see religious or racial enclaves and ghettos.
See, the problem is especially when they do come from Islamic backgrounds, they tend to do that, and it's actually very similar. This is why ethno-nationalists tend to resonate quite a lot, is because it does happen. You do get ethnic enclaves, and you do get these separate cultures, where, especially in Australia, where people have been told that multiculturalism is a good thing. They haven't been told they need to assimilate. Like, assimilation's been a bad word, like a dirty word for 40, 50 years now. It's been a dirty word for a long time. It's not a dirty word. We should be demanding our citizens fully integrate and fully assimilate to Australian culture, or they shouldn't become Australian citizens. And the idea that an Australian citizen wouldn't be able to speak English, I mean, how crazy is it that this even needs to be suggested? Like, I can't. Like, there are people, like, there are politicians who are saying no, that you shouldn't have to speak English to become an Australian citizen. So this is the thing. I have nothing against immigrants. Like, if an immigrant is a high-skilled immigrant and he's going to add value to the nation, and he's going to adhere to our values, and he's going to become fully Australian and make our nation better by their presence, then I have no issue with them coming to Australia. It's going to make Australia better. What I would feel sorry for is their home nation, because if they're so good that they're coming here and adding value here, then they're not adding value to their home country. So that's not good for them. So it means we're sucking all the talent out of the third world, second world, developing world. So it's actually not really very fair on other countries as well, if you really think about it. And so I think it's a really important issue to be talking about, and immigration needs to be a hell of a lot lower than it is right now. And we need to really start demanding that our new arrivals fully integrate into Australian culture, or they just don't get to stay here. They are, as they have said, guests.
I agree with you 100%. I agree with what Dick Smith was saying about lowering our rates of immigration into this country. And the left went mental about that. And the rates of immigration into this country do not need to be raised. They need to either remain static or be lowered. You know, I was living in Melbourne, and I can tell you, mass immigration in Melbourne has not done a really good service to that city, especially in the places.
It's not my city anymore.
Yeah. I can tell you, it's destroyed our roads. It's a pain in the bum driving anywhere in the city now, especially with all the road work.
Here's the thing. Just going back a little bit, the thing about ethnic enclaves. This is actually something that actually gives Europe, and Western Europe in particular, an advantage over a place like Australia, because when you have these people in enclaves, it's like they're there, and so it's easier to isolate them. It's easier to say, right, you're lot in that group, like, you're all shifting out. The thing about a place like Melbourne is it's just everywhere. And like you see the percentage of faces like in the CBD, like Australian faces are below 50%, but it's like you just have completely spread out. And so what do you do? Like there's no way of actually taking any kind of action to redress a demographic displacement or anything like that, because like it's just everywhere and everybody's mixing together. I know.
Right,
Can
I just interject and just ask a question? I'm sorry, this has just popped into my mind again. Like, talking about sort of like ethnic displacement and stuff like that in terms of like, you know, say Australia or you know, any other Western country which is sort of traditionally white.
Yeah.
If we had like an immigration policy whereby the immigrants were selective, like they were selected, and it's like, well, you guys agree and adhere to Western means you know, like I'll leave that off the table, but just sort of Western culture, Western standards, etc. And if like, you know, if that meant that Australia no longer was no longer predominantly white, would you have an issue with that? Like a legitimate question. I don't know if I'm asking my question that well, but I think you guys kind of get where I'm going.
Yeah. It's a question which I struggle with. A lot of the stuff that I say, like I listen to myself and I'm like, are you really saying this? Because, you know, like I like people and I like immigrants as well. It's a question that you've got to ask about what kind of country do you want Australia to be? What kind of country do you want the West to be? Like if British people...
I'm asking purely from a racial standpoint.
Yeah.
Because I think the lines do get blurred somewhat. That, you know, when we talk about immigrants and religion and race and all that sort of stuff and preserving Western values, a lot of the time that can get very closely conflated with people of other color. And I'm not putting anyone on the spot. I'm just sort of
I appreciate being put on the spot.
Can I answer this question? I'll answer it after you.
It's something that I've actually been thinking about. I've made the argument before, actually, that like if you replaced like European people with another bunch of people who were completely virtuous and were completely peaceful and were far more intelligent than us, far more peaceful than us, and made Australia a better place, but at the same time completely replaced Australian people, that would be immoral, because like people have a right to exist in and of themselves. And it's a really difficult argument to make. Like basically I'm at the point at the moment where if that was to happen, like even if they were to adopt Australian culture, but I saw the displacement of Australian people, I'd find it very difficult to associate myself with Australia or to identify as Australian, because I would feel that the original identity of Australia had been lost. I think the reason Australia was actually founded, the white British settlers in Australia were concerned about immigration from other countries, and the British Empire was actually quite happy to like send people from other parts of the British Empire to Australia, and the settlers of Australia wanted to actually defend against that, and that's why Australia was federated in the first place. So that was one of the main motivations for it. It's the sort of thing where I'm saying that, and I understand why it happened, and I can agree why it happened. It doesn't necessarily make it good, but I understand the argument for that, and it's a moral dilemma, I guess, that I'm working through myself, because
I think it's just like kind of this like really crazy situation that we live in, where we are, as people who care about our country and people who, you know, care about what our country was found, etc., we look toward the past and then we look toward the future, and we sort of sit in this middle ground. We go, oh, we're here right now, but you know, it's just like shit's going to change. And it's like, well, we can't have everything the way it was when our country was founded. We can't have that. We've got to kind of roll with the punches. And I think we've kind of just, like, I don't think we have to settle, but we just sort of have to accept that, well, you know, things are going to change, and, you know, what's the best solution? What is the best possible outcome for us in the next 25 or 50 years? If you know what I'm saying, like,
yeah, I do. I actually used to think that way, Christopher. But I basically,
well,
I feel that we've been socialized to think that way.
Like, so Chris, just let him. Can you let him answer, mate? It's
no,
like
no, I'm sorry.
Just let him answer. Like it's blocking it up, but he's answering. So we need the content to be clear.
I feel that we've been socialized to think that way. We've been socialized to think that change is inevitable, that this direction is inevitable. I think there's, and I think that's deliberate. I think there's a certain Marxist idea behind that. And so what you'll find with a lot of people who are ethnic nationalists have broken away from the idea that that direction is inevitable. Whether like actually achieving a political solution to this, or actually achieving any kind of solution is possible, is a whole nother matter. It's that it leads you to some interesting places when you no longer accept what you're saying is inevitable, when you no longer accept that is inevitable. That's what I'm working through.
Okay, I want to sort of butt in there as well now.
The issue. Sorry, Matty. Can I?
I'm gonna answer.
Yeah,
all right. The issue with the problem with having Australia become less ethnically European is that you've got to remember the facts. The fact is, the liberalism and the true freedom that we all enjoy and know and love came out of Europe, and it especially came out of Britain. Now, there is a genetic component to that. I mean, that's just, yes, it's cultural, but culture and genetics sort of mix, because, you know, if certain cultures tend to breed more, if certain ideas tend to breed more, then that gets passed on to the next generation, So there is a genetic aspect to our culture. And I would be worried that if Australia did become less than 50% European, not necessarily British, but less than 50% European, it would be a lot less likely to support the ideas that I support. So this is why you can't just dismiss. You can't just say, oh well, things are going to change. How do we deal with it? Because if things change too much, and if you get people from other ethnicities into Australia and they haven't fully assimilated, they're not the kind of individuals that you want in the nation. Because I mean, they're obviously going to be Japanese and Chinese and all these kind of people that can fully become European in the way they think, speak, and act. But it's not going to be as likely as someone who is a white British person who has 10,000 years of white British ancestry that actually bred those ideas and bred that culture and bred that way of being. So it means it's a lot less likely that it's going to happen, and you may find a situation where, just purely because of genetics, that it actually changes the society in the wrong direction. And I mean,
like you're coming over the dark side, Matty.
Well, I'm always interested in the truth. See, this is my thing. I'm interested in the truth, and I'm still adamant that keeping people out of Australia and locking people out of our culture due to their ethnicity, just like saying, oh well, you're not white, therefore we should lock you out. I think that's a bad idea. I don't think that takes into account the full picture, and it's not in line with what the truth of the situation is. The truth of the situation is that ideas and biology they're not completely independent. Culture and biology are both they're interconnected in a lot of ways. And like I said before, that doesn't mean that every white person's going to be fully liberal. I mean, there are plenty of white people that are Marxists that I would rather kick out of the country. And this is my problem with ethno-nationalism. There are so many white people that are that are so wrong about so much that I can't fully come over to that idea, the dark side, so to speak. Because in my opinion, it's not the most true idea. It's not as true as it could be. It's not the full picture. But at the same time, like you said, I mean, obviously British people and European people have the right to exist. But I'd argue also that if you have a child with someone from another culture, then that child is still got the genetics of Britain. And arguably, it's actually a lot stronger as a child. I mean, yeah, look, the genetics are, it's got genetics from around the world. But as far as I can tell, I'd love to see, I've never actually seen a study on it, but as far as I've seen, you got your kids that are half white and half Asian tend to be, they're taller, they're smarter, they're better looking, and they're genetically stronger in a lot of ways. So the children generally that I've seen that are mixed tend to be have a lot more genetic fitness. And this is why I just think the pure white nationalism or the pure ethno-nationalism for any nation, I think it's just a little narrow-minded in terms of what the actual truth is, which is why I think values are a much better way of controlling for that. Because I think, on the flip side, if you control for values, then you're going to tend to get more of that genetic material that you want anyway, and get down the track, and you're going to build ultimately a much stronger nation in the long run over generations. But the main thing is, it's like, I don't care who I'm around, or who are like the people that I'm looking at that I'm around, if they're speaking and thinking and acting like me, then that's not an issue. My issue with going through Melbourne right now is I go through there and there's so many mainland Chinese people who barely speak a word of English. They speak very, very rough English. They're not Australian in any sense. Like they're not citizens, obviously. They don't watch the footy. They likely don't even they don't understand how to have a real debate. I mean, there are people who, you got people from Taiwan who are a little bit more westernized, so you can actually interact with them. But I meet so many mainland Chinese people that we just have absolutely nothing in common. And I just can't see a lot of them integrating into Australian society. It depends on where they're from, and it's all down to the individual. But again, I'll just reiterate, I don't think ethno-nationalism is the most right situation. It's not the most right answer to the situation. The most right answer is to again treat people as individuals, but take into account the genetics as part of that individual, because we are a product of both culture and millions, if not billions, of years of evolution. So they're both, and the evolution and the genetics is probably a much stronger driver of those things, but they are both factors that we need to take into account. Now, do you want to respond to that, or because there's a question from the audience that I wanted to answer?
I was just interested in Christopher's answer. I've said what I wanted to say.
Oh, he's gone to the toilet, so he just said, sorry, got to piss in our chat. So hopefully you like that answer. I mean, I feel, because I've been listening to your arguments, and like I said, I'm an individual who likes to know the truth, and I don't hate anybody. I deep down love every individual, even when they're doing horrible things, because of the beliefs that I have. And it's hate the sin, not the sinner. Hate the sin, love the sinner. And this is my attitude to it. So I don't hate anybody. I genuinely love people, but it's like I still want to find the truth, and I still want what's best for me and what's best for my family and what's best for my community. And this is the issue that we're grappling with.
Yeah. When I talk about ethno-nationalism, I talk about it from a perspective of love as well. Because I don't hate people. I don't hate people from other countries. It's in the same. I just see it in the same way that you love your family. Well, the same way that you love yourself, you love your family, and the nation is an extension of that family. And so then I see you see the demographics and the way that it's going, and I'm like, well, we need to take action to address that imbalance. What do we do to address the demographic decline? And that leads to conclusions which are quite uncomfortable, and you have to work a way to make it work.
We'll hold those conclusions to to maybe another day, and we can talk about it, and we can maybe write articles about them on XYZ. But I want to.
It's always a conversation. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a conversation that we need to obviously discuss, because it is an issue. It is a big issue, because I mean, even if you don't subscribe to that view, which I mean, I sympathise with it, like the way you articulated it was quite good. But if we end up flooding the nation with people who don't share any of our values, which is what I'm seeing right now, then that's definitely a bad situation. That's definitely a bad situation, because I mean, you want people to assimilate and become Australian and become part of your country. So I just wanted to answer this question from Demolution Champ. It's regarding England and the thing that got us onto this topic, which is a topic we tend to get onto quite a bit. And that is, Matty, would you or could there be a civil war over this issue in England? Now, we actually talked about this last week a little bit. I think it is a distinct possibility, and it's probably a much higher possibility than people think. I think Tommy Robinson, this Day for Freedom, is a step in the right direction away from that, because if people are standing out and coming out for freedom of speech and saying, no, this is a problem, we don't want this, and and they're willing to say it and start talking about it, then you're a lot more likely to get a political solution. So you're a lot more likely to get people into Parliament who are willing to do something about it and willing to actually stand up for the British nation and the British people and British values, and really stand up and actually do something about it without the need for a civil war. And part of that is giving people back their right to speak freely. And that doesn't just mean no legal sanction. That means if someone says something that you don't like, you don't try and get them fired unless they're taxpayer funded. If they're taxpayer funded and they're mooching off you and you're forced to pay for them, then you're more than you're allowed to try and get them sacked. But if they're working for a private company and they have an opinion that you don't like, then you should really not be trying to get that individual sacked. You shouldn't be going to sponsors and trying to get sponsors to pull sponsorships because they had an opinion that you don't like. That's a really, really bad thing to do, and that drives you in the wrong direction. But so free speech is a way, like, because the good ideas will win out, and suppressing speech and free speech controls and censorship, that's a push in the wrong direction. That's a push in the direction of serious civil conflict, which we really do not want, obviously. Okay, I'll take that as a. I'll see.
Oh no! I yeah. Welcome back, Chris.
Oh, he is back. There he is.
Yeah, I'm here. I love replying to live chat comments. That basically gives me substance on my live streams, because I've got massive breaks in mental thought. So yeah, word up. Good on you.
Okay, so Gary's sort of asked Squeaky Dare about the Imam of Peace. I really like the Imam of Peace, actually. I think he's great. I think he's got balls the size of grapefruits, maybe even bigger, because he's an apostate almost to a lot of these people. And that comes with some serious. That's more threat than Tommy Robinson. I mean, I don't think that's a serious thing that he's doing there. And in my personal opinion, I think the way forward for Islam is full reform. I believe that it should be treated as not as the word of God, but as another book written by man, interpreted by God. But I'm not a Muslim, so I can't interpret it for them. Imam Tawhidi is. So I think he's the kind of guy that could actually reform Islam and bring it into the modern world, where these values that we're speaking about are actually they are taken up by Muslims. And I think that he's doing a really, really good job in that regards, because again, I mean, individual Muslims, I find most Muslims that I meet to be perfectly fine people. It's the ideology that I have a serious issue with, and the ideology is not a good one. And if he's going to be able to reform that ideology, then more power to the guy.
You see somebody who
truth. Well, like the thing is that like when you and I were talking about this, we're talking about the Quran and you know, I've read the Quran, and you're yet to read it, but there will never be a reformation in terms of Islam. There won't be. It's as simple as that. I know that's a really blunt statement to make, but it's not going to happen. It won't happen.
Why don't you think it will happen?
Shit, man.
Well, you brought it up, mate. You got to stick. If you're going to make statements and arguments like that, you've got to back it up with reason and evidence. These are the rules. These are certainly the rules. I mean, here's the thing. I'm not an expert on the situation, so I'm not going to be able to hold you to account.
Look, neither am I. But look, I think that well, I know that, you know, the biblical the text of the Quran is a lot different and held a lot differently to the text of the Bible. And as I was saying to you, that you know, preachers, the preachers within Islam have a lot more power than the Quran does in terms of what people adhere to. Man, I'm doing really bad with explaining myself tonight, but
no, it's all right. I get what you're saying. So it's the imams and things that are the ones who interpret it and teach it. And here's the thing. But this is why imam,
you know, the Quran is written in ancient Arabic, and it'd be like asking you or I to read the Bible in its most ancient text. And this is where Islamic scholars and preachers are preaching from, is from the ancient Arabic text. And, you know, even if you can speak Arabic, like, you're not going to be able to read that shit. You got to listen to the person who's preaching it. And so they're the most powerful voice.
Yeah. I would back up what you're saying, actually, Chris. It's like Islam has an immune system against people trying to reform Islam. For starters, like they kill you if you leave the religion, and they'll pretty much try to kill you if you say that there's actually. It's not that Islam has been interpreted wrong. It's actually, when you look at the core doctrine of Islam, like there's actually something wrong with that. Like Ayaan Hirsi Ali says that, and she has to walk around with bodyguards 24/7.
Well, it's kind of like Venezuela hasn't implemented socialism correctly. Well, actually, they've implemented it perfectly correctly.
Yeah, every single time with communism, every single time with Islam, the same thing always happens. And there's also a history of trying to reform Islam. Like there've been people throughout the centuries who've tried to sort of you know, just change the outlook. And Turkey for a while was used as an example of how Islam can be made subservient to the state. Like the state can separate the religion from the state. Yeah, but it's like it's just got this. It's a cancer, and it's like this cancer. Like you can kill it for a while, or you can put it into remission for a while, but it just keeps coming back, like in the way that Turkey is moving towards being a theocracy again. And also I think Turkey sort of used the sort of secular model as a little bit of a convenient way of getting over losing its empire. Like I think like the argument that Turkey is an example of becoming more secular, a Muslim country becoming more secular. I think that's a very convenient argument.
All right, so that's a good discussion there. I just wanted to answer the last one question before we go on to the last topic, because we'll be going for an hour 15 and we'll probably round it up shortly.
Sure.
So All Poll News, everyone, if you should follow All Poll News on Twitter. He asked, does that mean white nationalists should all get Asian girlfriends? And I think yes. Well, definitely.
We would have a master race.
It happens, it happens quite regularly. I don't know. It seems a bit strange, but again, like I said, you mix those genes. Sorry, I'm actually still talking. If you mix those genes,
just like interrupt him. Just interrupt
him. You do. Well, I can put him on mute if I wanted to, but I've got new powers and I'm not afraid to use them. So yeah, you can make the kids stronger and more healthy and all that kind of thing, and we could make the next generation one big happy family. I think that's, worst case scenario from an ethno-nationalist point of view, that would still be a pretty good situation because they'd still be family. It would still be family. It'd still be our children. And they'd probably be stronger for it. I mean, I wouldn't personally pick Asian girls. I mean, I'm not like they're unattractive. I just prefer Latinas, unfortunately, because they're all crazy. So I'm just a masochist in that regards. Latinas other than Squeaky, that is, she's a weirdo. And yeah, that's exactly right. Now, Christy, you wanted to say something.
Oh, no, I'm sorry. Like, I didn't realize that you were still talking. We had some lag there. But I just want to give a big shout out to Old Pole News. Like, long time no see, brother. Yeah, big ups.
Hopefully he's still in the chat right now. So anyway, we'll go on to the last topic, which is sort of actually what we're talking about now. It actually extends again. So we've done well segueing the topics today, and that's the Business Council and the unions in an unholy alliance to say that they want to have a bigger Australia. Now this, again, it extends onto the topic that we've been talking about, so it works really well. But what we can sort of focus on is what I find it's disturbing that these two groups that are supposedly against each other are both coming down on the same side in this issue. And here's the thing. I think they're actually coming down on it for two different reasons, because I believe that for the business point of view, for them, it's a lot of cheap labor and more people to buy their goods and services. So they buy stuff, they get it made overseas, and then they come and sell it to Australians, and there's more people for them to sell to. So for them, that's their idea. And I think for the unions as well, it's actually about getting people in to vote for the left. So I think that's the thing about the union. So they're in it for slightly different reasons, but both of those reasons are bad, and they're both wrong as well. So in terms of immigration, like, high immigration is not good for an economy. This is an absolute load of rubbish. High immigration has never, ever, ever been good for an economy. It doesn't work like that. Immigration can increase population. So it can increase, you can spread, like America got a lot of immigration, and it wasn't the immigration that built the economy. The immigration actually made the nation in terms of spreading over the territory. Immigration is, if you have really, really high skilled immigration or people coming in, they invest, then that can maybe grow up. But a lot of the time, what happens is you just suppress workers' wages and you push property prices up, you put cost of living up. And that's pretty much what happens when you have high immigration, especially when a lot of it's low skilled, which a lot of it is. You get a lot of people who, we would have had a lot of jobs that would be taken by teenagers, like especially restaurants, working at McDonald's, all that kind of stuff are traditionally taken by teenagers. And you get a lot of low skilled immigrants taking them now instead. So they is literally a they took our jobs kind of situation. They took our jobs. And the thing is, people used to laugh about that, but it's true. They are taking people's jobs. At the very least, they're driving their wages down, especially in low skilled work. So for that reason, and for the economic reasons, it's important that we actually put a very big limit on immigration to stop that from happening. Infrastructure can't handle it either. There's not enough roads in Melbourne to handle the traffic. It takes forever to get anywhere.
The thing that's really gotten me since I wrote the article pointing that out, that the Business Council and the unions had joined together. The thing that really is getting me at the moment is that for a long time, a lot of fake conservatives have made the argument that if you're against immigration, you're essentially a Marxist. Like when Tony Abbott came out very strongly for reducing immigration, Greg Sheridan wrote an article where he brought up, he basically said that Tony Abbott is in line with old school Labor Party. He even brought up the spectre of Gough Whitlam. But what's been it was really, really interesting to read the argument about why constant immigration lowers wages. Like it pointed out that like if you have a burst of immigration, like a short burst of immigration, there's an initial depression of wages as there's more supply, but then that leads to more output, which leads to businesses reinvesting, which leads to more production, and that raises wages. But the problem is if you have constant, relentless immigration, all you're going to get is that constant suppression of wages because there's going to be constantly more supply. Yet the fake conservatives make the argument, oh, immigration leads to higher wages, but they ignore the fact that that argument only works if it's a one-off.
And it doesn't actually work if it's a one-off. It's a fallacy. It's not true.
Right. Even that one.
Yeah, even that one. It's not true. Yeah. It's not true because, I mean, you get workers in and ultimately all it is an increased supply of employees. It's an increased supply of worker labor. I'm not sure. Chris is actually, I think he might have dropped. Chris, if you don't realize you've actually dropped, you might need to reset. But yeah, the only way that it does, it's not too bad for the economy is if the immigrants come in and invest in businesses and increase production and all that kind of thing. If immigrants are very entrepreneurial, then it's not such a bad thing. But a lot of the immigrants now, where they might have been entrepreneurial in the past, they really, really aren't these days.
Yes. All the skilled migrants from Tanzania,
yeah, all the skilled migrants and you know these skilled migrant refugees from Sudan who don't even work. And here I would say, well, you know what? If immigration is so good for an economy, why don't they move to Africa? Because Africa needs economic growth, so why don't they move over there? Like. Yeah. Why do we deserve all the economic growth? Why don't you go over there? Because they need it a lot more than we do. So that you guys are they're Marxists, aren't they? You want the world to be equal. Why don't you support immigration into other countries that actually need it a little bit more if it's so good for the economy? No, it's a complete load of rubbish. Immigration is not good for an economy. Okay. It's not good.
It's been quite interesting. Like you're continuing my economic education, maybe. Do you have anything to say on that, Chris?
Oh. he went out and came back in, so he didn't know what we're actually talking about.
That's a hospital hand pass, isn't it?
Yeah, it certainly is. Well, look, from what I caught, like it was what you guys were saying was pretty reasonable. And look, I'm not going to interject there because anything that I say is going to be like coming into the conversation halfway point. So, yeah.
Yeah, so I can keep crapping on about this issue forever if I need to. Now, are there any questions from the audience? Does anyone want to know? So Gary's mentioned Sally McManus needs to talk to some of her members. I've met some of the CFMEU shop stewards, and they know from membership point of view that they struggle to get migrants to sign up. Yeah, that wouldn't surprise me at all. It wouldn't surprise me that they're struggling to sign up, especially when they're from Asian countries where there's a lot less unionism. There's much less of a tradition of unionism over there. You could argue that it's genetic, cultural, all that kind of thing, but it is the truth that they don't tend to do it as often. So it's more about the voters. It's more about getting people in from developing nations and giving them taxpayer benefits and all that kind of thing in order to win votes, in order to buy votes. And they're doing it they do it quite a lot. There's all these taxpayer funded groups for certain ethnic groups, for certain parts of the multicultural community. And it's just essentially a vote buying exercise. And it's a way of stacking the deck because the left can't win the argument. And for business, it's much more motivated by money for them. So it's all right for the businesses if they're going to make more money, but it's not so good for the workers whose wages are suppressed. And this is the thing. They talk about, the government loves to say, oh, look, Australia's had economic growth for the last forever. Yeah, economic growth's been up, but GDP per capita hasn't gone. GDP per capita hasn't beaten inflation for years. We are technically in a recession. We've been in a recession for a long, long time. We're getting poorer. Each individual is getting poorer. I mean, I don't look around and I don't see much economic improvement over the last sort of 10 years. There's been a lot of extra construction, so there's been plenty of extra buildings, but it hasn't been a huge amount of improvement as far as I can tell, because it's not true economic growth. It's just more buildings, more space has been taken up. There's more people here. That's it. There's just more people here. We're not more productive. We're not more efficient. The economy is not stronger. The economy is actually getting weaker in real terms, and that's because we're getting flooded by migrants. Taxation's too high. There's too much government spending. It's too hard to hire workers because you can't sack them. The regulations have been a bit gone to the left, and the politicians are. I mean, if Tony Abbott's the only conservative in the entire. There's Tony Abbott, Peter Dutton, and Jim Milan, and that's about it. That's all I could name off the top of my head. Sorry, Hasty. Oh, Hasty. There's a few slightly conservatives. I mean, you got David Lionhelm and the LDP, so there's a few good ones, but the majority of Parliament, I mean, these even in the Liberal Party, they're just left-wing hacks. They don't deserve to be there at all. We need to get rid of them because they don't have the Australian interest at heart. They really, really don't. They just, they're either cowards who aren't willing to take on the media, or they're leftists who really don't like capitalism and want to destroy it. And that's that's just the way it is.
Glad she didn't pop an aneurysm there, Maddie.
Sorry, what was that?
Nothing.
I was going to pop an aneurysm because I was ranting so hard.
I
felt like that was a pretty good rant. I actually felt I got into a nice little...
It was fucking amazing. It was fucking amazing, man.
I got into a nice flow there. There were no ums and ahs, and it just went on and on and on, and I made the exact point that I wanted to make.
I know.
I'm starting to get the hang of this whole ranting thing. You know what I do? I just need long hair, and I need to start wearing a leather jacket and no t-shirt.
I was going to
hammer for the Australian.
Honestly,
no,
honestly, I was going to take you to my local favorite vegan cafe and get you to do a beat poetry stand-up routine.
Oh no, thank you.
And you know that I'm the sort of guy who goes to those cafes, so I know the best spots for you, bro.
Well, here's the thing, right? I saw this is why everyone should get on Gab, because Gab's amazing. I was going to mention this before we sign off. Everyone should get on Gab because it's totally uncensored. Well, totally uncensored. I mean, obviously you can't defame and incite violence and put porn up there and all that kind of stuff. But
call Maddie.
I've seen porn up on.
Oh yeah, maybe, I think you have to label it not safe for work. So you have to label it. So that's fair enough. There are so many comments on there that if they were on Twitter, you'd be like, bang, instantly banned. And this is what I love about it. It's amazing because, I'm a free speech and I can handle people saying things that I find offensive. In fact, when I read something that I find offensive, I'm like, that's hilarious. That's so offensive. It's like, to me, it makes me smile because it's like, yeah, you say whatever you want. You're completely wrong. I completely disagree with you. I think you're an idiot. But I think it's hilarious. And everyone should get on Gab. Sorry, what was that?
Offensive jokes are the only ones that are funny.
Oh, yeah. These aren't even jokes. These are people saying properly hateful stuff. And here's the thing, as I said, I'm not a hateful individual. I don't hate people. And I don't like saying things that are hateful. But if I see someone else writing it on Gab, I think it's hilarious. It's like, it's entertaining. It's really entertaining to me. And then there are there are the offensive jokes and all that kind of stuff. So people should really get on Gab. It's way more fun than Twitter. It is more fun. The problem is there's just not enough content. There's not enough people there. But yeah,
we're getting people over. We've doubled our Gab numbers.
You've doubled, big, amazing growth. Yeah, I think
we're catching up to you, buddy. We're catching.
Can I just are you guys getting a lot of Gabbies right now?
A lot of Gabbies.
A lot of Gabbies.
There's a word.
No, I'm just fucking with you.
He's being silly on my live stream. He's
Why did you invite me on?
we have to keep it. We have to keep it at worst M. Let's try to keep the rating an M rating.
Well, I'm not gonna do that. I'm
it's M rate. I mean, the swearing. I mean, I'll tolerate the swearing because we're not monetized anyway. It doesn't matter. But it's try not to get the innuendo too much. Just that's. I might set up another channel on another somewhere else, and we can just go all out, and it doesn't really matter.
I'm going to have to do some serious Googling.
On Googling okay. You might have to.
Yeah.
Someone asked the question,
Yeah.
going back to Kanye, Snoop Dogg tweeting a white Kanye photo. What do you think he was trying to achieve? Why would he think Blake? Yeah, I didn't actually see that. So yeah, this is the thing. It's like these leftists who are attacking Kanye, they're attacking him so much because he's black. It's actually racism. And I'm going to say that. And here's the thing. When a conservative calls someone a racist, this is a label. This is something that should actually stick, because I wouldn't call someone a racist if I didn't have a proper reason to say that that's racist. It is racist. They're attacking him because he's black, and that's the reason they're attacking him so much. They can't stand the fact that a black man's gone off the reservation. That black people aren't supposed to be conservative or free-thinking small L liberals. It's not allowed. Get back on the plantation and go pick my cotton and vote for me when you need to. I'll send you some money in the mail. It's not supposed to happen. So yeah, that's what I think of that.
I don't call it racism. I call it Marxism. He's using his race to push a Marxist agenda.
I would imagine it's the same thing. I mean,
I've just got a different definition for the same thing. Yeah.
Yeah, that's exactly. It's the same sort of. It's the same totalitarianism. It's the same thought policing. It is. I mean, we can call it Marxism if you want to. Actually, you know what? Marxism is probably a more accurate term. Just to be honest with you, it actually is a much more accurate term. It's a better way of saying it. Racism is probably too broad of a definition there, and Marxism is. Funnily enough, Marxism is actually a lot more specific, even though it covers so many more things. Apparently, I will add that when it comes to immigration numbers, a lot of the immigration is temporary migration as well. Not all of it is permanent. A lot of it is students. So if you wanted to stop a lot of the issues, all you would have to do is stop letting so many people become students in the country. So that's one thing that you shouldn't worry too much about demographic displacement in that regards, because a lot of it is student migration, rather like students coming over to study. So you see a lot of the universities are really growing quite a lot, because especially the wealthy mainland Chinese people will send their kids over here. They'll study here and then they'll go back and work at home. I'm more worried about the people who come here and live on welfare and never integrate and all that kind of thing. But it is a bit of an issue. See if there's any more questions.
Or is it all just shit posting in there, Matty?
Yeah, there's a bit of shit posting. Squeaky left. Squeaky's not there anymore. She hasn't been chatting. That's too bad. Squeaky, come back.
Good looking out, dude.
Hey?
Oh, I was just giving big shout outs to Squeaky.
Net migration. So Neville just said net migration is about 20,000 per annum. Is that net permanent migration though? Because the last I checked, net permanent migration was only about 50,000. A lot of that was actually temporary. As I mentioned, it's just growing that. Like we're just bringing in that much more Chinese students and temporary work visas and all that kind of thing. So I might actually, it would be good if someone could actually double check that for us exactly. But I did actually check the numbers, and I'm pretty sure net permanent migration is actually a lot lower than we think. A lot lower than, so it's not panic stations just yet. That being said, it is still too high. Even if it's 50,000 people permanently migrating to Australia every year is too many people. This will be the last. Sorry, guys, I've got a bit of hiccup. This will be the last question that we answer before we call it a night. Thoughts on the education system in Victoria? My thoughts are, it's crap. What about yours? It's crap. It's crap.
It's fucked.
It's fucked. We'll say that. We'll maybe answer that a little bit more in depth next time if we can. If you want to ask a little bit earlier, but yeah, it's been going backwards forever. It's just, this is the state. Like, this is the thing. You make it state funded, then you make it compulsory, then guess what happens? The standards drop. This is just basic economics. It's really, really simple. It really, really sucks. Okay, Neville just confirmed 200,000 permanent net migration figures last checked. All right, I'll believe you. I'll double check that. But yeah, if that's way, way, way too high. It shouldn't. It should be 10,000. That's how many people should be allowed in. Anyway, thanks very much, Christopher, for joining us on this wonderful Monday evening. No thanks, Dave. You can go back to eating your soy latte stuff.
Yeah, just watch it. Next time Melbourne Hall's on, mate. Sorry.
Hey, Dave, are you into decaf? Like,
we'll see you later, guys.
Only strong
Tune in next week.
lattes.
Follow us all on social media. Make sure you get on Gab and Minds because I have a secret Twitter account and I'm not going to tell you what it is. And but all my Maddie's One Life stuff is going to be only on Gab and Minds from now on because the big social media need to die. Anyway, see you guys. See you around. See you next time. And thanks for watching.